Liora Vayne thought she had married the love of her life. Just 7 days later, she was dead. Caden Mears, the grieving husband, claimed it was an accident. But Detective Alina Kearey knew better, and when Liora's estranged brother Seth discovered a hidden key, it unraveled a chilling truth no one was ready for. Liora Vayne had always dreamed of a wedding that would feel like a page torn from a fairy tale. When she walked down the aisle of the glass-paneled chapel nestled in the hills of Coleridge County, every eye was on her, every camera flash catching her smile. She looked radiant in her ivory gown, her hand gently resting in that of Caden Mears, the man who had seemingly stolen her heart with charm and gentleness. Friends called them the perfect couple. Their wedding was a quiet but elegant event, attended only by close friends and family. The sun had set beautifully behind them as they exchanged vows, sealing what everyone believed was the start of a beautiful life together. In the days that followed, Liora and Caden retreated to their modest home on the outskirts of town. It was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where everyone greeted each other in the morning and children played freely in the yards. Their home sat at the end of a winding cul-de-sac, surrounded by neatly trimmed hedges and flower beds. Liora had worked on herself. She took pride in making things beautiful, and her home reflected that, orderly, warm, and thoughtfully designed. From the outside, there were no signs of anything unusual, but on the 7th day of their marriage, the silence in that beautiful home turned haunting. It was early morning when a neighbor, out walking her dog, saw flashing lights and police tape surrounding the Vayne Mears residence. Word spread quickly: Liora was dead. The news shocked the community. Just a week ago, they had watched her dance with joy, the glow of a new bride lighting up her face. Now she was gone, found unresponsive at the bottom of her staircase. The initial story was simple, perhaps too simple. Caden told the responding officers that he had returned from a late business meeting and found Liora lying motionless, head bloodied, neck twisted at an unnatural angle. He had called 911, his voice reportedly calm but shaken. MTs arrived. But it was too late. She had no pulse. Her body was cool. She had likely been dead for hours. The official cause was blunt force trauma to the back of her head, possibly sustained from a fall. The staircase showed no broken railing, no blood trail, just the smear of red at the bottom step. There were no immediate signs of foul play, no signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. The front and back doors were locked. There were no defensive wounds on Liora's body. No one in the neighborhood reported anything strange. Still, something didn't sit right with the lead investigator, Detective Alina Kearey. Liora's wedding ring was missing. Not just her engagement ring, but the simple gold band Caden had slid onto her finger days earlier. Caden told investigators she had likely taken it off before showering. Yet it was nowhere in the house. As police scoured the home, they noted other oddities. Liora's phone was missing, as was her laptop. Caden said she might have taken them upstairs, and he hadn't noticed. A small scratch was found on Caden's right hand, though he claimed it was from his car door. There were inconsistencies, but nothing solid enough to act on. The medical examiner couldn't confirm if she fell or was pushed. In the days that followed, Liora's death made brief news headlines, but the public moved on. A tragic accident, they said. A new bride gone too soon. The husband mourned quietly. Her funeral was held without much media attention. Her parents, devastated, didn't speak to reporters. Her brother was notably absent. Only Detective Kearey remained unsettled. There was a feeling she couldn't shake. Accidents happen, yes, but not usually 7 days after a wedding. And not with missing devices, erased digital traces, and a missing ring. Something was wrong. And she knew that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Detective Alina Kearey began piecing together the final days of Liora Vayne's life with the kind of quiet obsession that grows when things don't add up. There were no visible cracks in the marriage from the outside, But as she dug deeper, subtle shadows started to emerge. The first place she started was the timeline, those 7 days between the wedding and Liora's death. A stretch of time, usually filled with joy and travel, was in this case curiously quiet. Security camera footage from nearby stores showed Liora visiting a local pharmacy 2 days before she died. She appeared alone, wore sunglasses, and kept her head down. She purchased over-the-counter painkillers and a small bottle of rubbing alcohol. The pharmacy clerk remembered her seeming distant and in a hurry. When questioned, Caden claimed he had no idea about the visit. He said Liora hadn't mentioned feeling unwell. Detective Kearey began interviewing neighbors. One woman reported hearing what she described as soft crying from the Vayne home 2 nights before the incident. She hadn't thought much of it, assuming it was a sad movie or a personal moment best left private. Another neighbor recalled seeing Caden pacing in the backyard around midnight earlier that same week. But again, nothing seemed obviously suspicious at the time. Liora's close friend and maid of honor, Varel Knox, provided a more intimate perspective. She revealed that Liora had gone unusually quiet after the wedding. Texts went unanswered, and when she did respond, her replies were short and vague. According to Varel, Liora had sent her a message on the 5th day of her marriage that simply sighed, "I'll explain soon, just not yet." There was no follow-up. Her phone records revealed even more silence. After the wedding, Liora made just 3 outgoing calls, one to the pharmacy, one to an unknown number, and one that lasted nearly 30 minutes to a prepaid phone that couldn't be traced. That phone was never found. The call was made late at night, and no one knew who was on the other end. Meanwhile, the house itself told a different story. The home security system was of high quality, complete with motion sensors and a backup battery. Yet, records from the security company showed that the system had been manually disabled at 10:04 p.m. on the night Liora died. Caden claimed he didn't remember doing it, suggesting a technical glitch or brief power outage. But utility logs contradicted that. No outages were reported, no service interruptions. The only explanation was human interference. Detective Kearey examined the inside of the house more thoroughly. In the master bedroom, everything was tidy, too tidy. There was no sign of a struggle, no knocked-over furniture. But behind the bedroom mirror, barely noticeable, she found a smudge. When tested, it came back positive for Liora's blood. It was a small stain, but deeply unsettling. The trajectory and size of the smear didn't suggest an accidental injury. It looked more like a cleanup attempt. Liora's laptop was missing, and her phone had been turned off days before the incident. Her social media accounts were wiped of new content post-wedding. That digital silence grew louder the more Alina explored it. No honeymoon photos, no thank you posts, no messages of joy. It was as if the bride had shut herself off from the world. The moment the vows were spoken, the case was starting to feel more like a well-crafted illusion. Caden's alibi was too clean, his behavior too composed. The grieving husband role he played didn't match the details trickling out. Still, nothing was definitive. There was no murder weapon, no witnesses, no confession. Detective Kearey was stuck in that frustrating space between suspicion and proof. She needed something to tie it all together, a key, literal or metaphorical, that could unlock the truth about what really happened in that house. Until then, all she could do was keep digging through the shadows Liora had left behind, hoping one of them would finally lead to the light. A week after the funeral, a letter arrived at the police station. It wasn't typed or sent digitally. It was handwritten on rough paper, the ink slightly smudged as if written in haste. It was addressed to Detective Alina Kearey and signed simply, Seth Vayne. Until then, Liora's brother had remained distant, refusing interviews and skipping the funeral altogether. His sudden appearance, through pen and paper, piqued Alina's interest. The contents of the letter were even more compelling. Seth claimed that Liora had contacted him just days before her death. She hadn't reached out in years, and the sudden message had caught him off guard. She left him a short but disturbing voice note. It wasn't filled with emotion or explanation. It was a cold warning. If anything happens to me, check the old cabin. The key is still in the box. That was it. No details, no panic. Just that cryptic sentence. Detective Kearey immediately began looking into the cabin. Seth revealed that it belonged to their late grandfather and was located in a remote forested area about 2 hours from the city. It hadn't been visited in years, as far as he knew. The box she referred to, according to Seth, was likely the antique jewelry box Liora kept since childhood. It was ornate, made of dark mahogany, and had once belonged to their grandmother. Seth remembered it vividly. It always sat on her dresser, full of old hairpins and tiny keys. A search warrant was granted for Liora's belongings. With help from her parents, Kearey gained access to Liora's closet. Inside, among boxes of scarves and fabric samples, was the jewelry box. It was heavy, its lid stuck slightly from years of disuse. When they finally opened it, nestled between yellowed lace and broken earrings, was a single brass key. It was small, scratched, and old. At first glance it looked insignificant, but Kearey felt a chill run down her spine. It was the kind of key that didn't just unlock objects, it unlocked answers. With the key in hand, Kearey and a team drove out to the cabin. The road was overgrown and narrow, the forest thick and silent. The cabin itself was gray with age, its roof sagging and windows cloudy with dirt. Inside, dust clung to every surface. Faded curtains hung like ghosts from cracked rods. Most of the furniture was draped in white sheets, untouched by time. They searched the space methodically. Nothing on the ground floor stood out. Then, in the upstairs bedroom, they found an old writing desk. The bottom drawer was locked. The brass key slid in with a perfect fit. Inside the drawer were dozens of manila folders, each one labeled with numbers, dates, and fake names. The contents were alarming. Bank statements showing large deposits under different aliases. Copies of fake IDs. Photographs printed on thick paper, many of Liora, taken long before she had met Caden. One folder contained pages of printed emails between unknown addresses, discussing financial strategies, false identities, and surveillance. Another had maps, receipts, and handwritten notes in Caden's unmistakable handwriting. Detective Kearey realized she wasn't looking at a box of keepsakes. She was looking at evidence of a calculated double life. Caden Mears wasn't real. He was a persona crafted by someone with experience and precision. The documents revealed a different name, Gale Renner, a man with a long trail of deception behind him. 5 years earlier, he had been investigated for financial fraud, but had vanished before charges could be filed. Somehow, Gale had found Liora, studied her, and inserted himself into her life. The marriage was never about love, it was about something else entirely. Maybe control, maybe protection, maybe something darker. The brass key, forgotten in a childhood box, had done more than unlock a drawer. It had torn open the entire truth. Now, Kearey had a name, a motive, and a path forward. The mask Caden wore was cracking. And beneath it, a predator was waiting to be caught. The discovery inside the cabin shifted everything. Detective Kearey no longer viewed Liora's death as a tragic accident or even a crime of passion. It had the marks of something far more sinister. The evidence found in the locked drawer painted a disturbing picture of Caden Mears, or rather, the man who had stolen that identity. His real name, Gale Renner, was connected to a closed investigation from 5 years ago involving embezzlement, fake shell companies, and a network of stolen identities. But he had slipped away before prosecutors could bring him in. Since then, there had been no trace. Until now, the evidence recovered was damning, yet fragile. There were no fingerprints on most of the documents, and the few photos showing Liora seemed to have been taken from a distance, likely without her knowledge. Some of the documents referenced offshore accounts, obscure company names, and untraceable bank transfers. One page contained a handwritten list of names, some crossed out. Liora's name was not crossed out. That detail made Kearey's stomach turn. She started reanalyzing Caden's past. Every detail he'd shared with Liora, his career as a financial consultant, his education, even his family had been fabricated. The man had built an entire false life from scratch. She contacted the law firm where he claimed to work. They had no employee by that name. His college degree was also unverifiable. His credit history showed gaps and inconsistencies, as if he had appeared out of nowhere only a few years ago. The question that loomed large was, why Liora? Why go through the trouble of marrying her? Kearey combed through Liora's own history for a connection, and finally, something surfaced. 3 years earlier, Liora had worked briefly as a freelance designer for a private finance company, one that had, at the time, unknowingly handled investments for a shell company later linked to Gail Renner. It was a small detail in her resume, one she probably never gave a second thought. But to Gail, it could have meant everything dotted. It was likely he had flagged her from that connection, tracked her over time, and slowly inserted himself into her life. Their chance meeting at a bookstore had probably been planned. Their whirlwind romance, her perfect proposal, all orchestrated. And once married, Liora could have given him access to something he needed, perhaps credibility, or perhaps she had unknowingly stumbled upon files that could expose him. Kearey's next step was to search the Vayne home once more. This time, she brought forensic specialists who scanned for digital evidence. In a hidden partition of Caden's office computer, they uncovered a series of encrypted files. One folder had been wiped recently, but fragments remained. Among them was a partial spreadsheet that appeared to track money laundering activity again, with Liora's company listed as a data source. The final breakthrough came when a second laptop was found stashed in the attic, hidden under insulation. Unlike the first device, this one had not been tampered with. Liora had used it to document suspicious behavior. There were journal entries, screenshots, and photos she had taken secretly, some of Caden in phone conversations late at night, others showing strange documents on his desk. In her final entry, dated just 2 days before her death, Liora had written, "I think I married a stranger. I'm scared. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." With this, the case shifted from circumstantial to prosecutable. Kearey assembled the timeline. Gail had carefully manipulated Liora into a marriage to either silence or use her. When she grew suspicious and began collecting evidence, he likely discovered her intent to expose him. Her death was not impulsive, it was strategic. She presented her findings to the district attorney. A warrant was issued for Caden Gale's arrest. But when officers arrived at the home, he was gone. His car was found abandoned at a highway rest stop. No sign of a struggle, no note, just a clean disappearance. Gail had vanished once before. Now he had done it again. But this time, he had left behind too many threads. Detective Kearey was determined to follow every single one. The manhunt for Gail Renner spread quickly across state lines. With his real identity now confirmed and evidence of premeditated murder and financial crimes stacked against him, federal agencies joined the search. Airports were monitored, border crossings flagged, and his name added to multiple watch lists. But Gail was a master of vanishing. He had done it before, and he had prepared for it again. In the days that followed, Detective Alina Kearey felt the pressure of time tightening around her like a noose. Every passing hour made it more likely that he would slip into the shadows forever. Despite the frustration, she remained focused. Gail had always been deliberate. He wouldn't run blindly. He would have a plan, a backup identity, a new life waiting. Kearey returned to the documents found at the cabin, looking for anything that suggested where he might go next. That's when she found it, an obscure receipt for a PO box rental in a remote town in Westmont County, issued under yet another alias, Derek Lane. A quick cross-reference showed that a Derek Lane had recently rented a room in a rundown roadside inn near the Westmont bus terminal. Surveillance footage confirmed the match. Just 3 days before the warrant had been issued, Gale had checked in under the false name, paid in cash, and stayed for less than 12 hours. But what he left behind in the room told Kearey everything. She needed to know. Inside the drawer of the nightstand, investigators found a small envelope. It contained one item, a wedding ring, Liora's missing band. The same ring that had mysteriously disappeared the night of her death. It was cleaned and wrapped in tissue paper, but inside the band, new initials had been crudely scratched. G.R. and L.V. It was a mocking gesture. A signature left behind by a man who believed he was untouchable, but it was also a mistake. The tissue wrapping had absorbed traces of oil from Gale's hands. Lab analysis produced a perfect match with prints found on documents in the cabin. Now, with DNA, fingerprints, and Liora's own written warnings, the case was sealed tight. Detective Kearey knew she might not get to arrest Gale herself. People like him had the resources to disappear, but the net was closing. Then came the unexpected break. An anonymous tip. A woman in East Ridgeline County, over 200 miles from the last known sighting, called the hotline. She claimed her sister had started dating a man named Aaron Kells, who looked exactly like the photo of Gale on the news. He had a similar voice, mannerisms, and wore the same style of vintage watches as the man in the footage. Kearey acted swiftly. The home was placed under surveillance, and after 2 days, Gale emerged. He was arrested without incident. Calm, composed, and as smug as ever, but he said nothing, no confessions, no reactions. He simply stared at Detective Kearey as if daring her to prove anything. But she didn't need his words. Liora had left her own in court. The prosecutors presented a devastating case. The timeline was clear. The evidence from the cabin, the recovered laptop, the encrypted files, and the journal entries all painted a chilling picture. Gale had targeted Liora through careful manipulation, using charm and lies to gain access to her personal and professional life. When she became a threat, he eliminated her. Liora's voice, captured in her own writing, rang out during the trial. Her journal was read aloud to the court, her fears, her realizations, her strength. The brass key she had hidden, her final safeguard, was placed into evidence, the symbol of her silent fight for truth. Gale Renner was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read, but outside, the media exploded with headlines. Yet for Liora's family, it wasn't about justice delivered in headlines. It was about knowing her story had been told. The forgotten key had done more than unlock a drawer. It had unlocked a hidden life, a dangerous truth, and ultimately, a path to justice. Though Liora Vayne's life was stolen from her just 7 days after her wedding, her courage ensured her killer would never walk free again.